He provided a recording device when it turned out that Victoria and Amber met often. In a restaurant booth photographed from a distance, and in an overheard conversation captured on that small recorder, Victoria's voice was butter smooth. "Timing is everything," she said. "We'll make her look unstable. We'll take the house." Amber's laugh was bright as broken glass. "He's easy," she said. "He wants to be adored. He wants to be needed. He'll think I'm the only one who understands him." I held the little recorder in my hand and listened to their conspiracy like a foreign language, becoming clear. They were not only having what I believed was an affair, they were engineering my removal. The words were clinical and cruel. Document her moods, catch her at an argument, build a file on incompetence and instability, and prepare the legal assault. My blood chilled when Javier told me what he'd found next, financial sleight of hand that made my stomach fall. Small transfers from joint accounts to Michael's private ledgers. Deeds that had quietly erased my name. Properties where my signature was asked for when deeds were already rewritten. They had been moving my life like chess pieces, quietly capturing assets, rerouting titles. It was not passion that had uprooted our marriage. It was premeditation. The next discovery, Victoria's hidden file, made me understand how much I'd been living inside someone else's narrative. A locked desk drawer in Victoria's house, the key under a porcelain angel as if she kept secrets on a crucifix, and pages upon pages of patient notation. Elena forgot to dust the mantle. Elena's childlike manners. Elena shows signs of instability. Each entry was a trap disguised as proof. At the bottom, a letter to a downtown firm, Hartwell and Burke, dated 3 weeks ago. I had been accused in ink before a court had heard a single word. And then an email, one of the many Javier intercepted, laid it flat. "We're ready to file," one read. "We will portray her as unstable and inadequate. Her late nights will be framed as neglect. My client's mother will testify. Housing for my client and his new partner is prepared." Next week, they planned. Next week, they would deliver the blow with the efficiency of people who had long ago decided other lives were expendable. You learn strange things about yourself when betrayal becomes a calendar. I did not scream then. I did not storm the house calling names. I made a plan instead. Hurt receded into resolution. I planted small devices, gathered bank statements, photographed notes and deeds, and let Javier follow Amber as she slipped in and out of hotel doors and Michael's office. I recorded my conversations with Michael, letting him say things that would sound ordinary in the light of a marriage and damning when placed beside evidence. When the divorce papers arrived, delivered by a man whose nerves I almost pitied, I signed with a hand that trembled but did not break. The tone of Michael's voice over the phone was a well-rehearsed performance. "We've grown apart," he said. "We want different things. It's better this way." He would find out how different things would be, but not in the way he imagined. In the weeks that followed, I wore my ordinary life like armor. I smiled at Victoria on Sunday dinners with a thin sweetness that felt like glass beneath my tongue. I invited her to the table while Javier listened in a corner, keeping his face schooled in impassivity. Inside the pocket of my coat, the manila envelope grew heavy with evidence. There were photographs, Amber's past, criminal records that tracked a pattern of identity fraud and predatory relationships. There were bank statements showing transfers that made the line between legal and criminal blur. There were the recordings of Victoria's own plans, the notes she kept like a prosecutor building a case. On one of those dinners, Victoria looked at me with that cold kindness and said, "Maybe this is for the best. You were never quite right for Michael." I thanked her for her honesty and set my face into the expression I had practiced in private, grief that could be read, but not collapse. That night, I wrote the letter I would place on top of everything, my account to the court, the clean, furious telling of their plan as I had unearthed it. I sealed it and placed it in the manila envelope with the recordings and photographs. The name on the front was steady, Sofia Alvarez. When the morning of the hearing arrived, I dressed with a legalist's care. Navy dress, braided hair pinned back, the pearl earrings my grandmother had given me for my wedding day. I wanted to look like someone who belonged in the light, someone the law would not ignore. Javier drove me to the courthouse. "You ready?" he asked. He had become more than a friend. He had tracked, recorded, and made a nest of proof from the wreckage of my life. "I've been ready for months," I told him. I held the envelope like a talisman in my lap. Michael sat in his practiced place, his lawyers with their crisp, arrogant schedules. Amber hovered nearby, speaking dutifully in his ear. Victoria looked like a matron of society, the posture of a woman certain of victory. But fate is a strange arithmetic. The right paper in the right hand can change sums. The judge called the court to order. Michael's counsel began the neat litany. Portray the wife as neglectful, display the mother's accounts of instability, and argue that the business and house should remain with the Hart family. They were precise. They were practiced. They were merciless. When the moment came, and I rose to go to the bench, my legs felt lighter than they had in months. The envelope in my hand contained months of work, photos, recorded admissions, bank records, and the letter. I placed it on the judge's desk, the seal aligned between what had been and what would be. Judge Patel lifted the contents. She listened. Her expression rearranged itself as every piece landed. She pressed the recording device, and when the evidence that had been laboriously gathered, Victoria's voice, Amber's casual admissions, filled the air, I felt the courtroom tilt. She set the device down. And then she did something that none of us expected. Judge Patel laughed. It was not a scornful or theatrical sound. It was a true, surprised, private laugh that scattered the arrogance in the room like leaves. Michael's face lost blood. Amber's hand flew to her mouth. Victoria's composure began to strain. "Karma, Mr. Hart," she said. My chest loosened with one small exhale of hope. The envelope had done more than I dared to ask. It had opened a door. But the door had not yet closed. The air was electric with possibility and with the knowledge that the true reckoning might still be ahead. As I sat there, everything rested on that single moment. I could not know how far the consequences would ripple. I only knew that for the first time in months, I felt the shape of justice as if it were tangible. The rest, the courtroom's slow counting out of consequence, the way wrongs are finally tallied, would come next. I could not predict the gradient from vindication to ruin. I only felt the earthquake's first tremor beneath my feet. The bailiff called us back to order. Judge Patel folded the papers with a steadiness that suggested long practice at holding human ruin in a judicial hand. She looked at Michael, then at Victoria, then at Amber, and then back at me. The eyes that met mine were not unkind. They were the eyes of someone who had received a piece of truth and knew what it meant. "Mrs. Alvarez," she said, "thank you. We will review this evidence and proceed accordingly." I walked back to my seat, my heart doing uneven things in my chest. Amber's cheap perfume brushed past me as she leaned forward to whisper in Michael's ear. Victoria watched from the front row, her composure cracking like varnish in heat. The smile she had worn for 12 years to disguise contempt was worn down, revealing something like alarm beneath. Outside the courthouse later that afternoon, Michael grabbed my arm. His eyes were wide and raw. "Sophia, please," he said. "We can fix this. Don't make this worse." I pulled my arm free. For a long time, I wanted to answer with the blunt things that had built like sediment in me over the years. You fixed it with your lies. You destroyed it with your plans. Instead, I said one thing that had been true the whole time. "See you in court," I said. He had never understood how literal I would be. I stood on the porch of my house that evening, the manila envelope now empty of its most damning witnesses. Copies had been lodged with Javier, more had been sent to the judge, and thought about the way people carve rooms for themselves in other people's lives. Victoria had thought she could tidy me out, file me away, and place someone more polished in my photograph. Amber had thought her smile could do the rest. Michael had thought he could have both the thrill and the safe harbor. They had miscalculated. The thing you never understand until you are on the other end of a master plan is that the person you intend to erase sometimes burns the ledger and writes a different ending. Night fell like a curtain. Inside, I lit the candles that always made my sketches look softer. I poured a glass of wine and sat at my drafting table, not to work, but to feel the lines of the city outside my window blend with the quieter lines of control I was taking back. There would be hearings, files, and legal headaches. There would be people who called me foolish for pushing back. But the envelope had shifted something. It had shown that what they conceived as inevitable might yet be avoided. And so I waited. No, not waited in the passive sense. I held preparedness like a weapon. The next move would be theirs, but they had to step into the light now. The cliff was drawn. Tomorrow, the courtroom would reconvene, and truth would begin a slow, cold walk across the carpet. I went to bed with my phone on the nightstand and the echo of Judge Patel's laugh in my ears. Somewhere in the dark, the city exhaled. I let the breath in and tried to believe that the next day would be the day the accounting finished. If it were not, then there would be more measures to take. There would always be more measures when someone has spent a life protecting wealth and appearances. Outside, the house on Linden Street slept on as if nothing had changed. Inside, everything had changed. I would have to be brave enough to meet that change. And then the day broke. The morning after the hearing broke like thin glass, pale light, fragile quiet. I awoke to the sound of my phone vibrating across the nightstand. For a second, I thought it was Javier calling, but the number on the screen was blocked. My heart tripped once before I answered. Mrs. Alvarez, a male voice said, low and professional. This is Detective Hollis from Financial Crimes. We'd like you to come in regarding the information submitted to the court yesterday. I sat up, clutching the sheet around me. Is there a problem? Not for you, he replied. For Mr. Hart. The call ended, leaving a dial tone that felt like a long exhale from fate itself. At the precinct, the world smelled of paper and coffee. Javier was already there, leaning against a metal file cabinet, arms crossed. Told you it would snowball, he said when he saw me. Detective Hollis motioned us into a small interview room. We corroborated your documentation overnight, he began. The bank statements, the property deeds, the audio recordings. They reveal tax evasion, forged signatures, and collusion between Mr. Hart and his secretary. It goes beyond domestic litigation. It's criminal. My breath caught. For months, I had chased justice like a shadow. Now it stood before me, real and solid. Hollis slid a document across the table. We've already issued preliminary warrants. We'll need you to confirm a few details before the arrest team moves. When I signed, my hand trembled, not from fear, but release. By noon, news cameras were outside the courthouse again. The story broke faster than gossip could travel. Corporate consultant and partner arrested on fraud and conspiracy charges. The names followed like falling dominoes. Michael Hart, Amberly, Victoria Hart, as alleged co-conspirator. I watched it on television from my office, the one space that had never belonged to anyone but me. Javier sat opposite, 2 coffees between us. Feels different, doesn't it? He said. Yes. My voice was quiet, like breathing after being underwater too long. Still, a part of me ached. Justice has a strange texture. It satisfies and hurts all at once. I remembered the man who once brought me flowers on Mondays just because. I remembered the laughter before the rot beneath it. That memory didn't vanish with the warrant. It lingered. You okay? Javier asked. I nodded, then caught his gaze. There was something steady in the way he looked at me. Something that had been there for months, waiting for the dust to clear. 2 weeks later, the courtroom looked different. Michael sat in an orange jumpsuit, the arrogance stripped down to silence. Amber avoided my eyes, mascara staining the edges of her mask. Victoria looked smaller somehow, her perfect hair flat, her hands trembling as she adjusted a bracelet that no longer gleamed. Judge Patel entered, carrying the weight of inevitability. Given the evidence presented, she said, and the confessions obtained under investigation, this court finds sufficient cause to proceed with a criminal trial. In the matter of Mrs. Sofia Alvarez versus Mr. Michael Hart, the civil proceedings are hereby resolved in favor of the plaintiff. Her gavel struck like the end of a storm. I felt the sound travel through my ribs. Years of humiliation, gaslighting, and betrayal condensed into one decisive thunk of wood. Michael turned toward me. Sophia, please, he whispered. voice hoarse. I never meant. Stop. My reply was simple. Meaning doesn't change consequence. He dropped his gaze. Outside, reporters called my name, but I kept walking. Javier followed a few paces behind until we reached the marble steps. You did it, he said. We did it, I corrected. You believed me when no one else would. He smiled, the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. So, what now? I looked down the long avenue where traffic glittered in the sun. Now I build something that's mine and only mine. Need help building it? I glanced at him, a half-laugh breaking through the exhaustion. You mean besides the moral kind? I'm a decent carpenter when I'm not chasing criminals, he said, and the ease in his tone made warmth bloom in my chest for the first time in months. Maybe redemption doesn't arrive in fireworks. Maybe it's quieter, two people standing on courthouse steps, realizing the future has room for gentler things. Weeks bled into months. I reopened my design studio under a new name, Atelier Solara, Light Reborn. Projects rolled in faster than I expected. Word spread about the designer who exposed her husband's empire. People admired resilience the way they admired daring architecture, with distance and envy. Javier dropped by often, sometimes with a file he pretended was urgent, with dinner he claimed was left over. It wasn't. I learned to stop pretending not to notice. One evening, as we installed lighting fixtures in a new client's penthouse, he said quietly, "You ever think about what's next for you, not the business?" I looked at the city's skyline reflected in the glass, the glow painting both of us in amber light. I used to think next was just survival, I said. Now, maybe it's choosing who stands beside me. He didn't answer. He just reached for another bulb, his shoulder brushing mine. That touch said enough. Spring arrived, and with it, a letter postmarked from the state penitentiary. My name, written in Michael's careful script. For a long time, I let it sit unopened on my desk. Finally, one rain-drenched night, I slid it open. Sophia, I see what I was too blind to see. The empire was never mine. It was built on your steadiness. I've lost everything, and maybe I deserve to. I don't ask forgiveness. Only that you know the truth. The plan wasn't mine at first. It was my mother's. She wanted control over everything, and when she brought Amber into it, I was already drowning. I lied because I was weak. But there's something else I need you to know. Someone else was feeding her information about your business deals, someone inside your company. Find them before they finish what she started. Michael. I read the letter twice, the words sinking like stones. Someone inside my company. I thought the war was over. It wasn't. 3 nights later, I returned to my studio after closing to find the door ajar. A single light glowed over my drafting table. Papers were scattered, drawers open. My stomach dropped. I stepped inside, cautious, calling, "Hello." No answer, just the whisper of air conditioning and the faint tick of a clock. Then a voice from the shadows. You always did underestimate who admired you most. Victoria stepped forward from the half-dark, elegant even in ruin. Her hair was silvered, her eyes cold. I should have known, I said. She smiled thinly. Michael's in prison because you couldn't keep quiet. But do you think that stops the plan? The properties, the accounts, half of them still trace back to me. You may have won a trial, but I built the field you play on. My pulse thundered. What do you want? To see you undone properly. She lifted a phone, pressed a button. A recording played, my own voice, spliced and edited, sounding guilty, greedy. This hits the media tomorrow, she said. A little scandal will collapse that shiny brand of yours. Javier's voice sounded from the doorway behind her. Not tonight, Victoria. He held up his badge. Behind him, 2 officers stepped in. You really should stop underestimating detectives who know how to trace burner phones, he added. Victoria's composure was shattered. As they cuffed her, she hissed. You think this ends with me? You think truth stays pure once it's out there? Her words echoed as they led her away. Later, sitting on the studio floor among scattered blueprints, I let the adrenaline ebb. Javier knelt beside me, brushed dust from my sleeve. It's over, he said softly. I looked at him, searching for any trace of doubt. Is it? He held my gaze. Yes, Sophia. You took back your life twice. That's enough fighting for one lifetime. I leaned into his shoulder, the city lights painting streaks of gold across the floor. For the first time, silence didn't feel like fear, it felt like peace. Weeks later, Atelier Solara unveiled its biggest project, the new Civic Art Museum. As the crowd applauded, I spotted Javier near the back, hands in pockets, smiling. When the lights dimmed for the final reveal, I thought of every shadow I'd stepped through to reach this moment. After the event, he joined me on the glass balcony. Beautiful work, he said. Thank you. For the building, he clarified, then added quietly, and for everything else. I turned toward him. What do you mean? He hesitated, then smiled. You'll figure it out. And then, he kissed me, gentle, certain, nothing like the hollow gestures I once mistook for love. Months passed. Life steadied. Then, one crisp autumn morning, an anonymous package arrived at my doorstep. No return address, no handwriting. Inside was a single photograph, Victoria seated across from an unfamiliar man in a prison visiting room. On the back, scrawled in neat ink, 5 words. It never really ends, does it? My breath caught. I looked out at the street, empty, quiet, deceptively safe. The photograph trembled in my hand. Somewhere out there, another secret was already waking. And I realized, with a chill that felt almost familiar, the story was only sleeping. When I woke up in that hospital bed, everyone said it was an accident, a crash I was lucky to survive. But when I saw the bruises shaped like fingerprints on my neck, I knew luck had nothing to do with it. Someone wanted me dead, and the person holding my hand, whispering, "I'm so glad you're alive," was the same one who tried to kill me. My hands were sweating as if the courtroom's chilled air couldn't reach the storm inside me. The wood table under my palms was polished and indifferent. I gripped its edge until the knuckles whitened. Across the table, Michael Hart sat as though he belonged to the room. Tailored suit, that practiced smile, the same slicked-back hair he wore when he wanted to look dangerous and irresistible at once. Beside him, Amberly laughed like a woman with everything to gain, a secretary who'd been arranged into something far more intimate. Her dress had the kind of price that made people notice. Her laugh had the kind of bright, brittle quality that made me imagine it echoed in hotel rooms and empty corridors long after he left. In the front row, Victoria Hart watched like a monarch at court. 12 years of marriage had taught me the hard lesson of that smile, polished, precise, never touching the eyes. Today it looked different, triumphant. I felt the weight of it like a physical thing. Judge Patel arranged papers at her bench, glasses balanced on the bridge of her nose. She had a reputation for cutting through nonsense with a clear-eyed focus of someone who'd seen human weakness, so often it no longer startled her. My attorney, Mr. Reynolds, kept his head lowered. Defeat sat on his face like a coat too large for him. He'd tried to warn me this morning. He told me the other side's narrative was tidy, believable, a tired, distracted wife, an ambitious husband moving on. He'd used gentler words than the ones I heard in the courtroom now. Mrs. Alvarez, Judge Patel called, and the voice in the room tightened to a single string. Do you have anything further to present? I reached into my bag with fingers that did not feel like mine and drew out a thick manila envelope. My name was across the front in my hand. Sophia Alvarez, written the night before, steady while the rest of me had been anything but. I do, Your Honor, I said. My voice barely rose above a whisper. I have additional evidence. Michael's smile stiffened. He leaned toward his attorney and hissed something that was supposed to be a private scheme. I heard the smugness in it. Amber's shoulders shook with that brittle laugh. She flicked a glance at Victoria, who nodded like a woman agreeing to the terms of a partition. They thought this was over. They thought this was already won. My legs felt like the thin supports of a chair, liable to give way. The envelope weighed 1,000 pounds in my hands. Every step to the bench felt like walking through water. Crystal clear fluorescent light glared down at me. The murmur of the courtroom fell to a hush so total I could hear my own breath. Judge Patel opened the envelope. She sorted the papers, lifted a small recording device, and began to read. I watched her face scrub through curiosity into something hotter, surprise, then into a look I could not name. She pressed the little playback button and closed her eyes while listening. Whatever the device held, whatever memory I had tucked into that thin case and those sheets of paper, began to rearrange the room. Michael's composure cracked. His hands stilled. Amber's laughter went quiet, the sound dead in her throat. Victoria's smile softened like frost caught in the sun. Judge Patel set the device down and, unexpectedly, laughed. Not a polite or learned laugh, but one that came from some private place where wrongs were measured and justice recognized. It landed in the air like a verdict. "Karma, Mr. Hart," she said simply. I did not know then how far the spiral would fall, only that the envelope, sealed and hurried, all the evidence I could gather in a week that had felt like a lifetime, had already shifted the balance. That shift was enough for now. For the first time in months, I let myself breathe. 6 months earlier, my life had been the picture of ordinary abundance that gossip columns and yard parties mistake for destiny. The 2-story house on Linden Street, the white curtains I'd chosen, the kitchen that always smelled faintly of coffee and vanilla, things I had selected with my own careful taste. Michael would kiss my forehead as he left, straighten his tie, throw back that smile that used to be for me, and only me. "Have a great day, beautiful," he'd call from the driveway. He would back his black sedan out, and I would watch the neat arc of his car until it turned the corner. I had built my interior design business from the simplest of beginnings, friends' living rooms, an office lobby here, a boutique hotel bar there. The phone eventually began to ring with clients who wanted me to transform their spaces. A month before everything started to tilt, I landed the Marriott lobby redesign, the kind of job that paid to finally gut and renovate our master bathroom, the thing I had sketched in the margins of invoices and sleepless nights. Michael sat in my study one evening when the business began to bloom, a room he'd called my excuse to get back half of his old den, and said, "You need the space more than I do." He helped me move fabric swatches and a drafting table with an affection I chose to call trust. "I'm so proud of you," he said. Those words were like light after a long rain. But light at the wrong hour casts long shadows. I had always known what Victoria thought of me. Her comments, the little niceties that left bruises, that's an interesting choice, were daggers wrapped in lace. I bent myself around those barbs, cooked her favorite dishes, let her rearrange the guest room in a floral pattern that made my throat tight every time I passed. I tried, for his sake, to be the woman who belonged. The first crack did not come with a fight. It came in a casual message that lit the screen of his phone the way a match lights a dry field. I was rinsing a glass, the water warm and ordinary, when it buzzed on the counter. I could see the preview without touching the device. "Can't wait for tonight, baby. We'll start with that red dress. Amber." I thought I would be sick. Amber was a name, at first. A secretary. A convenience. I tried to tell myself I was imagining the heart. Maybe she meant someone else. It was a childish smallness that swelled until it burst. Victoria, too. The text about timing, the callous laugh. It was not one misstep. It was a tidy plan, and suddenly my life felt like a scene in which I'd been compelled to play a part. I drove to Javier Cruz's office that afternoon. Javier had been my neighbor and childhood friend, a slow-smiling boy from the bakery street who became a detective and then a private investigator when the city's blue couldn't give him the kind of answers he wanted. His small office smelled of coffee grounds and determination. He listened with the quiet economy of a man who had seen too many private tragedies. "How long has he been late?" Javier asked, pen poised. "Months," I said. "Maybe half a year." But he was always busy. I thought it was the market. "You didn't open his phone?" he asked. "I didn't." "You didn't," he repeated, softer. "Good. That will help. Let me take a few days." A few days stretched into a frantic blur. Javier supplied photographs, Michael and a young blonde leaving a hotel, stolen kisses in a shadowed parking garage.